My name is Dawn Zimmer. I was the former mayor of Hoboken. I was mayor from 2009 to 2017. So I was mayor during Sandy, so I had the experience of really taking the city through that and the recovery process. Now I'm working for Schneider Electric and working to really help communities to achieve their infrastructure goals and to become more energy efficient. Also working with our microgrid group and again really trying to help communities think about that as a strategy to keep their communities safe through the storm, be able to operate through the storm, and help with the recovery process as well. Sandy was a hurricane event that struck the East Coast in 2012. So in Hoboken, the water came in from the north and the south of our city. We are a 1 square mile city right on the Hudson River. It was about a 14, 15-foot storm surge, and we literally became one with the Hudson River. People had fish in their garages. Our fire stations were flooded, our senior center, our wastewater treatment facility, all of our electrical substations. 80% of the city was underwater. It was a toxic mix of Hudson River water combined with raw sewage. So it was really extremely difficult for our community. So that was our experience of Superstorm Sandy, but it struck the whole East Coast. It was a major, major challenge. For Sandy, I was really focused, my number one priority was making sure that we kept our community safe. So, from the beginning, actually before the storm struck, I deployed our community emergency response team. So those, they work hand in hand with the police department and the fire department, our first responders, and helping to go around, knocking on doors, letting people know that there's a big storm coming, they need to get prepared, they need to maybe, if they live in a ground floor apartment, think about evacuating. So that helped to really, get people thinking about and getting prepared for the storm. Then through the storm, we had some major challenges, but, with having enough fuel and keeping our diesel backup generators going. But we, again, our first responders, working with our CERT team, working with community organizations that came in, we had what we call a point of distribution system where we were delivering food to people that couldn't get out of their homes. We had a lot of seniors who were, they're in big buildings, the elevator doesn't work and they can't get out. So we had a system of, they can't, and also it was difficult to get people to evacuate. So, I do feel that there's an opportunity to help people to shelter in place. And so we were distributing food and medicine through the storm. And then, after Sandy, it was a process of recovery, and I worked really hard to get funding for Hoboken. And so as part of what's called Rebuild by Design, it was a big design competition. We were able to win that and, worked through the process of developing a preferred alternative and getting the funding released in that project. I'm very proud is on track and moving forward, and it will protect Hoboken and the region for the long term. I was part of, I'm working with my, with my team, with the OEM operations, so there's a planning process that we go through with, with the police department and the fire department, our ambulance corps. So, we had the experience of going through Irene the year before. That was pretty severe flooding, and we had to evacuate the hospital, and so that was almost like a dry run for then Sandy, which was even more severe the following year. So we had that experience. But yeah, it's really working with our teams and then working with the CERT team as well to try and prepare the community. A couple of things that I would think about, is I didn't really envision and imagine the debris. So the debris management is, we were able to get a plan together and quickly remove the debris, but that was a major challenge and a hurdle, and I think that's first part of the recovery process. I also wish that we had passed a flood prevention ordinance in advance of Sandy, so that flood prevention ordinance requires people to raise up their utilities, so they'll be and built more safely. So I think probably a lot of people built as is right after the storm because we didn't have that legislation in place, and I understand they wanted to do the rebuilding and get back into their homes, but I wish that we had gotten that legislation done in advance, and so I think people would be safer. But that legislation is in place now, so when people do remodeling or when we there's new buildings that are built, they are built to those higher codes to help keep our community safe. When I think about, especially communities that are facing the flood risk, I think, it's a focus on flood resiliency, energy resiliency, and community resiliency. And with flood resiliency, I think it's a matter of recognizing, like, you can start the planning process. You can start looking at what your risks are and, start trying to take steps to move forward. I recognize that figuring out the funding is a real challenge, but if you go through that visioning process and you start trying to plan for the future and get some projects done, if you are the one that's unfortunately hit with a category 4 or 5, you're going to be ahead as far as you're going to be able to turn that crisis into an opportunity. You will be better positioned to do that if you have done the planning in advance of being hit by a severe storm. I also feel like the community emergency response team can play a vital role in helping to keep your community safe. And so if you don't have a CERT team, I encourage you to, consider doing that. We have a volunteer-based CERT team that, they're a part of every festival and emergencies that we have, and they really play a big role in helping to keep Hoboken safe. So I think that's something else that communities should really consider starting up if you don't already have one, because that can make a big difference in making sure that you keep everyone safe. And that is a big part of the reason we were able, even though we were 80% of our city was flooded, we had the power out for several weeks, and we had people stuck in their apartments. We kept everyone safe through the storm because of that community resilience, because of that teamwork, with our public safety team. And I think trying to go through, emergency training, I think would be terrific. I think, potentially going through the training that we offer. We have a training for our community emergency response team. So I think for mayors to understand the value that the CERT team brings. I mean, I had to play a role in sort of helping, at first our police department and our fire department were resistant to the idea of the CERT team and working with them, but I think that has actually, now they see it as a big benefit, and they're working with them on all major events that we have. The CERT team is out there sort of playing a supportive role in helping to keep the community safe. So I think trying to do emergency preparedness training, I think, is a good idea. I think also trying to, for mayors to think about how can you move towards distributed energy? How can you have a reliable source of energy for your community? So having been through the experience of almost losing, almost running out of fuel for our backup generators, almost, having several of our diesel backup generators fail, not having enough fuel for our emergency vehicles, I feel very strongly that we need to shift and have more distributed energy. And a microgrid system, I think, is something that can really help to keep communities safe. So I think communities should be thinking about how can we make that shift, and how are we going to make sure that we have a reliable power system for our police, for our fire, for our seniors, for our emergency shelters, to really keep our communities safe through the storm. If you are a civic leader who is interested in exploring the potential for a community microgrid, that's something that the private sector can help with. And Schneider Electric, we are actually, this is our area of expertise, and we can come in and do an evaluation and help you with determining whether it's feasible to move this forward. And we have partnerships with energy companies that they are the ones that own the assets. So the business model is there to, and the potential is there to do these kinds of projects to help keep your community safe. So I can be reached through dawn.zimmer@se.com, so through Schneider Electric.